Welcome everybody back into Nerd Sesh. As always, I'm Carson Breber and alongside me is Logan Camden. And today we are probably going to make some of you mad because we are going to be ranking the top 10 scorers in the NBA. I'm really excited. I think this is a pretty fascinating conversation. And I gave my top 5 early in the year. I think the opening week of the season, some of you guys asked for it, and so I gave it. My top 5 is a little bit different from then, and now we get the full top 10 list. And Logan, you haven't revealed your thoughts to the people at all. So let's start with some honorable mentions. Who were some guys who were very pained to leave off this list, if any?
Yeah, I was really pained to leave a few guys off this list. I think my most controversial cut is probably Jayson Tatum. I don't have Tatum in my top 10, and I omitted him for somebody that I think is more physically imposing, a guy that, you know, his jump shot waxes and wanes, but his physical imposition on the game when he is at his best and when he is fully locked in, I think, overwhelms and is a little more consistent than Tatum's inconsistent games. So Tatum was probably my toughest omission. My next toughest omission was probably Zion Williamson. I really debated what I should do with Zion, man, because damn, dude, Zion, the way he absorbs contact, his touch around the rim, I think that can kind of get lost. Like, we're so obsessed with how physically imposing and how strong Zion is and what a freak athlete he is, but that's really taking away from the grace and elegance that comes with his game. Like, again, he's so good at taking that body contact, still going up, finishing through, and and he's got great touch with both of his hands. So it's like, I debated Zion because I do have a couple of those really physically imposing guys, but that's going to be a big difference for me on guys that are really high on this list and guys who are low on this list. Like, if you don't have touch shot making, if you're not a great shot maker from everywhere on the floor, or at least multiple areas on the floor, I have to hold that against you. Again, it's like, I wouldn't hold a prime Shaq off of this list because of how dominant he was in the paint, but it's like there's nuance to this and there's levels to it where in different scenarios where if you're starting with the ball in an ISO situation at the top of the key, I may be more inclined to give it to a guy who's a little more skilled and great at over-the-top shot making than a guy that is great in the paint. But I can't completely count out a guy whose game is predicated on interior scoring. So there's a lot of different ways you can go with this list, but Zion and Tatum were probably my 2 toughest cuts. And then the next 4 guys, all guards, Jalen Brunson, Kyrie Irving, De'Aaron Fox, and Donovan Mitchell were all very tough omissions for me, but I had to leave them off. There's so many great scorers in the league today, and I'm always going to fall on the side of bigger guys, physical guys, guys who have really well-rounded scoring skill sets, and physical profiles are definitely important in that, and I think that's what holds some of these guards back from being higher on my list. But this is a tough list to come up with, Carson. I'm really excited to get into the weeds and kind of debate where these guys should rank. This was a excruciating list to make, man.
So I think I may know who you have at number 10 just based off of the brief description that you gave there. It sounds like it may be LeBron James. I'm not sure, but LeBron is maybe my toughest cut because I do think that when he is the level jump shooter he's been this year, when you think about his ability to attack and brutalize mismatches at will, like, the guy is still a hyper efficient, physically dominant scoring machine. To me, it just comes down to the fact that everybody else on this list, I think, can carry that true number 1 load for an extended run in a way that LeBron hasn't shown us this last year and a half, and maybe he is just saving that level for the postseason, but I left him off because of that. Zion is a really good choice. He is one of the very rare guys who feels truly unguardable in a lot of matchups just because his physical tools are so overwhelming. I do think, though, he hasn't been at that peak physical dominance throughout this whole year. He's gotten there as of late, but hasn't quite produced with the volume that he would need to be on this list for me, and the lack of over-the-top shot making does matter some, although I think, again, you'd be hard-pressed to find the defenders who can really make that matter against Zion because he's mostly going to get where he wants. And then if you're talking about the small, hyper-skilled guards where there are a few good candidates, Brunson is the one for me because of his variety as a shot maker compared to Donovan Mitchell, who's been awesome this year. I just think there's some more volatility there. There's some more questions about shot selection, settling repeatedly for these tough pull-up threes, whereas Brunson is going to play with this incredible methodical pace, get wherever he wants on the floor. And I mean, his shooting efficiency, right? He's 55% on floaters. He's insane from mid-range. He's 43% from deep. The guy is just an assassin shot maker. So those are probably my toughest cuts, but I ultimately feel pretty good about the 10 who I have on this list. I do lose a little bit of sleep over LeBron, though, the more I think about it. So why is it that he's on your list?
Yeah, LeBron is in the number 10 spot for me, and it's the physical control that I know that LeBron can reach when he's on. Now, we have to address where LeBron lacks and where he's lost a little bit of a step over the past few years. He doesn't have that elite quick burst that LeBron once had. Like, he doesn't explode out of the gates to the hoop. But to me, it's just he's still strong as a freaking ox. And when he wants to, that if he wants to go on the low block and he wants to big body someone, he's just going to get there. And in transition, he is still a monster at finishing off plays. Like, if you give LeBron a runway or you give him an open lane to the hoop, that is an easy bucket. And considering where his jump shot has been this year, I don't think I can leave him off. He's over 40% from behind the arc. He's still up near 25 points per game, and that's on, him being on a bit of a minutes restriction too. LeBron hasn't been really efficient in a bunch of different play varieties. Like, LeBron hasn't been a great over-the-top shot maker too. Carson, he's shooting just 31% on 5 pull-up attempts per game. When you can wall off LeBron from getting fully downhill to the hoop, or you can take away that open three-point look, like, LeBron hasn't been a great scorer. But like I said, it's a level of trust and confidence that comes with LeBron that in those matches where he can just back somebody down or he can impose his will on a guy, he's still super strong. He's still got great touch. He's good without the ball. And I still have to value that a little bit. He's a 92nd percentile, or he's a 91st percentile cutter this year. He's still really effective off screen and in transition. He's effective as a roll man. He's a 92nd percentile scorer out of handoffs. Like, LeBron still does a lot of great things. He's obviously not what he once was. LeBron from last year would probably be higher on my list. LeBron from 2 years ago may crack my top 5. This LeBron is barely getting into my top 10, and it is partly due to what you said, Carson. It's like if a guy wasn't healthy, or if a guy, if I couldn't trust a guy to always be out there, that might come into play. And I think you have to consider the fact that LeBron's stamina and cardio at this point in his career and his body, it's just he's 40, man. I mean, he just physically cannot take the toll. So I understand completely you not having him on your list. If it is a concern of physical exertion and how much he really can do that possession to possession, I completely understand that argument. But in my eyes, it is a single game scenario. And in a single game scenario where I need a guy to flip that lever, to flip the switch, even though LeBron is 40, I still have a baseline level of confidence that is a top 10 scorer on the planet when it comes to him flipping that switch. So I'm going to put LeBron in my 10 spot. I just would, at the end of the day, Carson, I just looked at this list and it felt incomplete without LeBron on it.
I get it. I do just think, though, it is so much more about him picking his spots at this stage. And if I need a guy for a fourth quarter, I'm taking LeBron over Jayson Tatum. I just think that ability to hunt those specific mismatches, right? If he's going to have Austin Reeves come over for a go screen, that two-man game is so deadly. If he's going to be able to hunt a switch out of the post, if he's able to get those catch-and-shoot looks on the wing, he's been pretty lethal from deep this year. And obviously that didn't hold up in last year's playoffs, but he just was a bad jump shooter throughout the regular season last year, and he's been really good this year. I do think that there is that feeling that when he is at his best, it's just still so physically imposing. But I also think I have to give credit to the guys who are carrying that load for seasons, who I think for an entire playoff run would be more equipped to do it. And so I get the argument for LeBron. I'm going to have to leave him as my first guy off. And I do have Tatum in that 10 spot, who this year is giving you 27 a night on 60.5% true shooting. And even though his regular season production maybe isn't as great as last year in terms of scoring, I think that he's pretty clearly better than ever. And there's a couple reasons for that. Number one, something that we've talked about lacking in his game is shot variety. And at times, just not physically imposing himself as much as he can, especially this year when he's added 15, 20 pounds of muscle. And you look at him and you think, this is a 6'8" tank of a man who sometimes just wants to take 10 pull-up threes in a game, and if those aren't falling, that can be a real problem. that dynamic has been a bit different this year. He's posting up over twice as much as he was last year when that really wasn't a prominent part of his game at all. And he's scoring with 85th percentile efficiency there. And it just works. He's a strong wing. He has great balance. He has good footwork, and he's a skilled shot maker who at 6'8" can shoot over a lot of people. And particularly if he's hunting a mismatch, like, he's a real problem down there. He is still quite reliant on the pull-up three, which isn't ideal because I do think he can let defenses off the hook with that, but he has improved. Last year, Tatum shot 29% on pull-up threes in the regular season and didn't have a good pull-up shooting run in the playoffs. And when you were talking about that level of inefficiency, like, that can sink you. When you look at the guys who are at the top of the leaderboard in terms of pull-up threes attempted, like, Tatum was well below everybody else. This year, he's shooting 34% on pull-up threes. That's still the lowest of the 9 guys who take 5 or more pull-up threes a game. So of the real high-volume pull-up shooters, he is still the weakest, but it's a significant improvement from 29%. And if he can sustain that efficiency throughout a playoff run, then it's probably not so much of an issue. But I do still worry a bit about the volatility that comes with his reliance on those pull-up threes when he's not great at making those shots. The guys above him are pretty consistently just elite in terms of shot making there. And his reliance on those is a big reason that he's shot below 40% from the field in 15 playoff games over the last 2 runs. That is more than 1 in every 3 games. The 1 in every 3 games Tatum shoots 6 of 18 from the field meme, like, is very much based in reality, and it's because of that. And so overall, his production over these last 2 postseasons compared to these other guys just doesn't quite stack up. Of course, he's got a larger sample size because those are 2 deep runs, but 26 points per game on 57% true shooting, very good, but we're talking about some really exceptional scores above him. So he is better than ever, and if he can really change that dynamic and more consistently impose himself physically, I think that he has the ceiling to be above this. But when I look at the dudes above him, it's like, all right, they're either like more consistently just physically dominant, right? A Giannis Antetokounmpo, who I know is going to get to the rim at will over the course of a game, or they are elite pull-up shooters, a Kevin Durant, a Devin Booker, guys who are just nails on those shots. And Tatum theoretically has the ability to combine, like, being a really good physical force, not Giannis level, with being a really good pull-up shooter. But unfortunately, we've seen a bit too much of the not imposing himself physically and then not being a great pull-up shooter in these playoff settings. So I kind of need to see it to move him higher than this, but I think he's done enough work to be in my top 10.
The shortcomings that you mentioned about Tatum are ultimately why I left him off. And in my opinion, Tatum is one of the more inconsistent superstars that we've seen in the league in recent memory. And what you mentioned about his skill set, Carson, is what makes the Jayson Tatum experience so frustrating, is that it's like he has all of these traits and he has all of the skills. The one delineation I want to make between the great pull-up shooters that you mentioned with Tatum is that I feel like all of those other guys also, not all of them, I feel like most of them, SGA, KD, Kawhi, they all weaponize their physicality a little better. And then when you're talking about the Devin Bookers, the Lukas, the SGAs, the other really reliant pull-up jump shooting guys, they all also create more separation too on their jump shots. Like with Tatum, it's like, again, that's what makes it so frustrating, is he has all the tools in his bag. He just doesn't utilize them to his full strength, and he has these bad tendencies. Like, there's just a level of faith with all the other guys, even including LeBron. Like, LeBron, it's like watching an old point guard, man. Like, dude, Kyle Lowry and Mike Conley. Sorry, this is a bit of a tangent.
Sure.
Kyle Lowry and Mike Conley fascinate me, man. It's like the old guy playing pickup at the park. Their level of control of the game and how they see the floor. And it's like, they're not the fastest anymore. They're not the strongest. They're not the best shooters anymore. But they know exactly where the ball needs to go and what play needs to be made. And if you were out of position in that one spot, they're going to find the pass. And I think as Jayson Tatum gets older and he's just played more basketball, I think he's going to grow into just being a better basketball player that knows what shot he needs to get, how to counter. I think Tatum's going to get better is what I'm saying. And that's ultimately like why I go with a guy over LeBron. It's like, I know LeBron knows what shot to hunt. I know LeBron knows where the ball needs to go. Like with Tatum, there's just a level of inexperience and a level of inconsistency that I still think is there with him. And I want to give him credit for what he does, because sometimes I feel like I can take Tatum for granted. Like we can move too far in the other direction where we rag on him too much. But that level of inexperience and inconsistency is still there a little too much for me to put Tatum there. And he just isn't as elite at those other skills as the guys above him. But Tatum is probably my toughest cut. I mean, he's been putting up 25 a night for a while now. Like, it's hard to omit a guy like that from the list. And these are really minute differences, but those are the differences of being on and off the list.
Yeah. You make the separation point, and Tatum loves his sidestep threes. And that just to me speaks to a general shot variety point where it's not just about Tatum getting to the rim more in relation to settling for threes. It's also about utilizing that mid-range area, right? And he's improved there. And the increased use of post-ups is a big part of that. Last year, he was like 75th or something in mid-range makes per game. There was that whole thing about how analytics ruined Jayson Tatum. He stopped utilizing that part of the floor. It made him too predictable. This year, he's 22nd in mid-range. I still think a guy like Devin Booker has more variety as a shot maker, has a deeper bag, has more counters. But Tatum has narrowed the gap by a bit. It's still a difference. It still matters to me in those playoff environments. But I am somewhat hopeful that those improvements on the margin can make a difference, and maybe he just has a better pull-up shooting run than last year from deep regardless. But it is those little differences. Versatility is huge when you talk about maintaining consistency as a scorer, having options to go to when option 1A isn't working, and Tatum just isn't the most proven there. Okay, who do you have in the 9 spot, Logan?
At number 9 is a guy who honestly has a very, very simple game, and the fact that his buckets all kind of come in the same way. It's Giannis Antetokounmpo, and the reason that I can't put Giannis higher is the skill factor, the over-the-top shot-making element of Giannis's game, is the fact that we have seen in the playoffs in fourth-quarter environments where they give him the rock. You think about the last series against the Heat. They don't have Damian Lillard. They have Chris Middleton and Drew Holiday, and it's like, man, Giannis is scared of taking the basketball. He doesn't want the ball in his hands, and that's a little detail of why I can't put Giannis higher. Is it's like just in those grimy, I need one bucket, we're going to start with it at half or we're going to bring it up. I just, I don't trust Giannis to make a tough jump shot. He has to get to the rim or somebody has to manufacture that for him. But he's so dominant in doing that he has to make the list, right?
Yeah.
Over 30 points per game on 65% true shooting. I've been a Giannis detractor for a long time, and I've once said that Giannis is one of the least aesthetically pleasing basketball players that I've watched, and I want to clear the air. Giannis still has these uncoordinated, gangly moments that are just funny to watch. It's like cartoon-esque almost, where like you could put some Benny Hill music, or you could put some whoop, 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 like some Moe and Curly noises behind him, and it would make sense, because it's like he just loses the ball in transition, or Giannis still has these really goofy moments, but he also has these other ones where, he's spinning like the Tasmanian devil to the rack, weaponizing his weight and just bouncing off of somebody to an easy dunk. Giannis's footwork is a lot better than it once was. He is a lot better at operating through the lane. He is still super strong and an athletic freak, and if he gets within 13 to 10 feet of the hoop and there's a body on him, he is one step away from yamming that thing home. And it is insane. And like I said, Giannis has grown on me a lot. I enjoy watching Giannis a lot more than I have over the past 2 years. There's just a level of poise and control with Giannis now that it's just not as ugly. And there's a lot less foul baiting and contact grifting with Giannis. It's a lot more old school Shaq dominance, where it's just like, damn, man, he's unstoppable. And so that's why Giannis makes my list, is in 99% of matchups in the NBA that he is going to draw today, no matter the player, he can physically overpower them and overwhelm them. And again, I can't put him higher on this list because when he gets walled off for two guys, he doesn't turn to pull up over the top shot making. He kicks the ball out. We don't consider playmaking in this. So you have to consider the totality of his scoring arsenal in this argument. And that's why he can't be higher. But he is such a dominant, overwhelming, interior, athletic, physical force that he has to be here. Because if you don't double team him, if you're putting a single guy on him, Giannis is basically getting a bucket every time. There's just guys that can do it in a more variety of ways. They can do it in basically any matchup. And again, over-the-top
Yeah.
shot making is huge. You have to consider one-possession scenarios, but I think Giannis is a lock for the top 10. His physical dominance, you have to have him in here.
Giannis was tough to rank. I had him at number 9 for a while. I moved him up one spot. And we have the same fundamental concerns, the same reason that I couldn't have him in my top 5, regardless of maybe what the box score effectiveness says. When you have that one clear limitation, when you are capable of a meltdown in crunch time like he had in the playoffs last year. Obviously, it's just a couple games, but he shot 15% from the field, 3.5 points per game in fourth quarters in the playoffs last year. Couldn't make a free throw. We saw in those stagnant one-on-one isolations and post-ups against a guy who physically could hold up against him, like Bam Adebayo. He really struggled because he couldn't overpower him, so it led to these out-of-control drives and offensive fouls and turnovers and a lot of missed shots because he is still completely lacking in touch. He shoots 37% in the paint outside the restricted area. Every time that Giannis takes a three, you still cringe. And it does matter that there are those very specific situations in specific matchups where it almost feels like Giannis is more helpless than anybody else here because everybody else is always going to have that difficult shot making that Giannis just completely lacks. At the same time, in 90% of matchups, there's almost nobody who makes the defense feel more helpless than Giannis because he is just that freak physical force. And so I think he has a higher ceiling than some of the guys above him. Like, if you are just looking at front lines that cannot match up with him, if you think about what he did in that 21 title run, like, that was just consistent physical dominance that really nobody in the sport can replicate, but he also does have a lower floor because of that lack of half-court skilled shot making. And ultimately, I do think that he needs to have a great perimeter shot maker alongside him to succeed in these situations in a way that other guys don't. It doesn't have to be a superstar, but even the level Chris Middleton was at in that 2021 run. If we get a better version of Dame, he needs somebody who he can lean on to some extent in those spots. But I think that I prefer his overwhelming physical dominance to the guy who I initially had one spot above him. Now I have one spot behind him because the thing is, they both have a weakness, and Giannis's pops up more in these crunch time situations specifically, but over the course of a game, I mean, in the playoffs since 2021, he has still mostly gotten what he wants. He averages 30 points per game, 57.5% true shooting. Even in the disaster class we think of last year, he had 38 and 20. He just melted down in the fourth quarter. And he will never disappear for a game because of that. He might disappear in a fourth quarter, but not for a game. And the guy who I do have him one spot above, Logan, also has a limitation, and his is that he can't get to the rim at this point. And I think that there are certain matchups in which he is so specifically dependent on these same sort of pull-up jumpers that he can fade away a little bit, and that is Kevin Durant. And this makes me a little bit nauseous, frankly, to have Kevin Durant at number 9 on my list, man. I think that Kevin Durant is one of the 3 greatest scorers in NBA history. But he's 35 years old now, and the fact that he's still here at all is amazing, and it's because he is an absurd jump shooter. He's averaging 28 points per game on over 64% true shooting. He shoots 53% in the paint outside the restricted area, those short-range jump shots and touch shots. He nails 49% from mid-range and 44% from 3. And because of his size and fluidity and handle and jump shooting, he can still rise up and get a good shot pretty much whenever he wants. He's also great away from the ball. He's a 90th percentile spot up scorer this year and makes 48% of his catch and shoot threes. Just unconscious in terms of knocking down shots off ball. But the reason that he can't be higher to me, there's actually a few. Number one is that his rim pressure is the weakest of really anybody who we're talking about on this list. You could argue Steph Curry is in that same range. I would say that we've seen a few more moments from Steph where he's able to get to the rim in these playoff settings, but also the difference is KD is more prone to settling for tough twos, whereas Steph is going to take 12 threes and make 40% of them, and that's just going to lead to more efficient offense because KD isn't going to shoot 60% on those tough twos in these playoff environments. Last postseason, 7% of KD's shots came at the rim, very low number. In 2022, just 14% of his shots came inside of 10 feet. Like he was barely getting into the paint, period. And there are those big physical wings who have given him some trouble. Jayson Tatum and a little bit of Jaylen Brown 2 years ago in the postseason. Aaron Gordon last year. Like if guys can bump him off of his spots a little bit and somewhat effectively contest those jumpers, he just can't get to the rim in the same way that he used to. And again, he's not going to have those flame-throwing performances from deep because he doesn't take enough of them. So he's still a monster, but over the last 2 postseasons, that efficiency has taken a hit down to 58% true shooting. The production is still good, 28 points per game, but there have been moments where you feel like, boy, KD is just not able to get what he wants regardless of matchup in the way that some other guys are. And again, because he doesn't take those volume pull-up threes, only makes one every other game this year at 34%, he doesn't have that same explosive potential. So when I compare him to his own teammate, Devin Booker, I think they have the same fundamental limitations, which is that they aren't great rim pressures and they are relying on those pull-up jumpers. But Book is a bit more physical, a bit quicker, so he's able to generate a bit more of that rim pressure. I think in terms of counters, he's a bit more versatile when you think about the ability to spin off of a guy, to throw a fake, to attack out of the post. Like the footwork and everything down there is just remarkable, whereas KD, it's oftentimes cross into pull-up jumper, and that works really well, but we're really picking nits here. And there are certain dudes who just have more ways to dominate, and Book has actually now been a more efficient pull-up shooter than KD throughout this regular season and throughout last postseason. So he is such an insane jump shooter that he still mostly thrives regardless of matchup, and I could see him having a nuclear playoff run just because the guy doesn't miss, but that lack of variety compared to some of these other guys does matter. And again, like, he has obviously an advantage as a skilled shot maker over Giannis, but he has a physical limitation in the way that Giannis is a skill limitation. And for the most part, I just think Giannis gets what he wants more than Kevin Durant at this point.
This is a good take. This was the hardest spot on my list to debate between on who to go with, Giannis and KD. And my distinction, the reason I went with KD over Giannis, which I'm now second guessing, I mean, you make a good point. It feels like KD struggles to get what he wants more than Giannis does. And that ultimately is what we're getting at here. Who gets their buckets easier? You know, who can manufacture the easiest buckets? The reason I went with KD is I was thinking in that individual possession scenario, KD can basically, it's the inverse of Giannis. Giannis can only score in this one area. KD can score in every other area but this one area. So I'm going to stick to my guns here just because KD can get me a bucket from anywhere on the court. Because basically like Giannis can dominate physically in 90% of matchups, KD can shoot over the top of 90% of matchups where he can just get whatever he wants. So I'll stick to my guns here, but what you're talking about is very real in the terms of KD's burst. He doesn't blow by guys anymore. KD's slight framed, so physically against stronger guys, he is just going to kind of bounce off those guys and be forced to redirect into a tough jumper where his feet aren't set. And the numbers that you talk about are very real. Just 18% of his shots are coming in the rim, at the rim. That's the third percentile of everybody in the NBA. 57% of his shots are coming out of the mid-range. That's in the 99th percentile of the NBA. And it's stupid. It's stupid how efficient that Kevin Durant has been on all of these shots. He's shooting 83% at the rim. He's shooting 50% in the mid-range. He's shooting 44% from deep. Like, KD's stupid efficient, but that lack of rim pressure and dynamic shot making is ultimately what keeps him from climbing higher. I'll stick to it just because in an end of game scenario, I still think I'd rather have Kevin Durant than Giannis, but this was the toughest one for me to rank, trying to pick between Giannis and KD because they are similar in their limitations, but I ultimately sided with Kevin Durant. And man, number 7 is a debate I don't want to have.
Interesting. Similar in their limitations in the sense that they both have a limitation.
A major, their
limitations are very much flipped. Again, it just comes down to me to over 4 quarters. If you think about what Giannis can do, that 2021 run, or 2022, where even though his efficiency isn't great, I mean, giving the Celtics a defense equipped with great personnel that was totally keyed in on stopping him, still giving them like 35 a night. Again, the efficiency wasn't great, but he was so physically dominant, and that doesn't account for the playmaking value that he also had, which does just raise his overall level as a player. Like, that's why I think Giannis is a top 3 guy, even if he's number 8 on my scorers list. It's because his offensive value, I mean, the rim pressure he exerts goes beyond just his scoring value. And then also he's an all-world defender and an all-world rebounder, so those things certainly matter. But it just comes down to be able to get what you want. And there are matchups in which both of them struggle, but I think that KD can struggle a little bit more, and I think Giannis's ceiling is a little bit higher when you just don't have the dudes who can match up with him. It's tough, though. It's tough. Okay, who is in that 7 spot for you, Logan? Bro doesn't even want to say.
Man, dude, I don't know where to rank this guy. I can't tell if it's personal bias or not. At number 7, I have Joel Embiid, and I'll put it like this. The only reason that Embiid is this low is just because I haven't seen it on the playoff stage. This year, like, if we were just going off this year, man, I mean, Embiid's probably somewhere in the top 3. It's literally the fact that for most of these other guys, and, like, you can't say this for SGA because we haven't seen him on the big stage, but I trust SGA's game so much to just translate there. Because we've seen Embiid's jump shot fail him on the biggest stage, it's literally just battle scars and wounds.
Yeah.
Because this year, man, the array and the different ways that Embiid was getting buckets, man. They're running dribble handoffs top of the key. They're getting Embiid a lane, and he's just big bodying a guy. If it's him just physically overpowering a dude to the paint and getting whatever he wants, if it's him catching a jump or catching a pass at the elbow and immediately getting into a jumper, Embiid can really do it all. And with his physical advantages that he has, he's unstoppable. It's just that I haven't seen it on the biggest stage. That's the only reason that he's not higher. Like, he was efficient basically out of everything. 51% on jumpers, 51% on pull-ups, over 40% on fadeaways. The guy's shooting over 45% out of the mid-range. Embiid was nuts. Like, 35.3 points on 65% true shooting. A very limited sample size here. Carson, he was 100th percentile as a pick-and-roll ball handler this season. Like, that's what's so crazy is Embiid's such a big dude who has these physical advantages, but is also such a fluid athlete and has a great handle and is great on the low post, is great out of isolation, is great in spot ups. Again, you can run inverse pick and roll with him, you can run DHOs with him, or he's the handoff guy. It's ridiculous. Carson, he's shooting 45% on 8 pull-up attempts per game. That's insane.
Yeah.
For a guy that has all of these advantages physically, to couple that with elite jump shooting is insane. And again, if he was still healthy and still doing this at this point in the season, maybe he would be higher on my list. But it's just Embiid's playoff runs have left a really sour taste in my mouth that I just can't wash out, that stings me. That I wonder if his touch goes away, how effective is this guy? That in matchups against great centers, out east, if it's an Al Horford, if it's a Porzingis this year if he comes back healthy, that he can get walled off by these other really strong, stout guys. And then if his jump shot leaves him, it's like, okay, well, you've gone from the best scorer on planet Earth to a really just average scorer. And that's the only reason. Embiid this year was the best scorer in the NBA. I can't act like he wasn't. What Embiid has consistently done in the regular season warrants him being... It's like saying that... I'll make a comp like this to wrap up on Embiid. It's like Peyton Manning in the regular season. Peyton Manning in the regular season is the greatest quarterback of all time. Ultimately, regular season football is not the standard that we should judge the greats on, especially quarterbacks. All credit to what you do during the regular season, but we all know that when Peyton got to the playoffs, he didn't perform up to standard. The regular season was Peyton's, but the playoffs were Tom Brady's. The regular season can be Joel Embiid's, but the playoffs are Nikola Jokic's. And so until that dynamic changes, until Embiid shows me that on the biggest playoff stage that he can do what he does in the regular season, and again, it took Peyton a really long time. It took Peyton nearly a decade to finally prove that he could climb the mountain. And guess what? Peyton really didn't perform all that well during that playoff run. They don't really want you to talk about that.
They don't want you to talk about it.
But Embiid is very similar in that career arc, and until Embiid shows me on the playoff stage that he can do that, I just frankly cannot move him any higher on this list because there's going to be that sinking feeling in my stomach that says, is he going to disappear? And that's what holds him back from being higher on this list.
I get it, dude. You're obviously preaching to the choir. I do feel like what we saw from Embiid this season was even a little bit different from last season, which was different from the season prior when he was already averaging a super efficient 30 points per game. I have him a couple spots higher at number 5, and the reason for that is that number 6 and number 7 on my list are more proven playoff performers, and they are spectacular pure shot makers. But Embiid has the skill set to blend overwhelming physical dominance with elite shot making. And the ceiling that presents to me is almost unfathomable, but not really, because it's just what we see Embiid do in the regular season, where it is historic scoring production. And if he can put those things together for one run, he can go nuclear in a way that almost nobody else on the planet can. The reason I can't have him higher, even though he is the best regular season scorer in basketball, is because of what we've seen in the postseason. Last 2 runs, he's 23.6 points per game on 57.5% true shooting. Huge hit in terms of production, huge hit in terms of efficiency. And there's a few reasons for that. One of them, which is a little bit tough to calculate for in this list, is that he hasn't held defenses accountable with his playmaking, which means teams are more comfortable doubling him, which doesn't necessarily reflect his scoring ability. That's more his overall offensive ability. That's been part of his hit and efficiency, but also he just hasn't been the same shot maker. This year, he's 50% from mid-range, 37% nearly from 3. Over those last 2 postseasons, he's 44% from mid-range, which is okay, but significantly worse, and 19% from 3. So his jump shot has just completely left him. And the other key thing is the reliance on getting to the line at times through grifting. That's the difference between him and a Giannis Antetokounmpo. Giannis's free throw rate is going to stay quite similar because Giannis gets to the line by just going through you, right? With these hard, hyper-physical drives. Embiid, sometimes it's the rip through. It's very conscious decisions of, okay, your hand is in this position. I am going to try to get to the line right now. And sometimes those things just don't translate to the playoffs. Historically, they don't. Your free throw rate is going to go down if you play like that. It happened to James Harden. It's happened to Joel Embiid. He's gone from 12 free throws a game over the last 2 regular seasons to 9.4 over the last 2 postseasons. That's a real chunk out of his free throw production, which he can rely on in spots. But again, it's that ceiling. And yeah, the reliance on free throws concerns me, but if he's a great shot maker, then it doesn't matter. The problem has been that he's losing a couple free points and he can't make these jump shots that in the regular season are routine. I mean, when he is dialed in, what feels more inevitable than Embiid jab step, nails a face-up jumper in your face? Embiid rhythm dribble, pull up right in your face from 18 feet. Like, he's unconscious. And I have to believe that to some extent, at some point, that'll translate. But there are guys above him who I don't even really have a question about that. But the guys below him, again, don't have those same physical advantages. So I am giving Embiid the nod, although they are more proven. My number 7, I know that I just went on an Embiid monologue, but we got to keep pace with the list here, is Devin Booker. I'm interested in where you have him. It seems maybe you have him a little bit higher. Book is maybe the most versatile shot maker on the planet. This year, he's giving you 28 points per game on 62% true shooting, but the versatility is unfathomable. I thought that Hoop Venue, who makes awesome content, he made a video about Book, which I haven't had a chance to watch, but in like the tweet advertising it, he said something along the lines of like, Book scores with the efficiency of an elite modern big with the shot profile of an early 2000s guard, which is very, very true. But he is such a great shot maker that his shot quality just doesn't matter all that much. He shoots over 53% in the paint outside the restricted area, taking over 4 shots a game in that range. He's over 47% from mid-range, where he takes 6 shots a game. And he's 38% from 3, where he takes 6 shots a game. So it's incredible variety and incredible shot making from everywhere. And it's not just the locations on the floor, it's the number of ways that he can get to those shots. There was a 3-minute stretch in the third quarter last night, Logan, where my jaw just dropped at what Book was doing. And he makes this stuff pretty routine. But the sequence starts, he hits a spinning jumper, leaves the dude in the dust, creates separation. It's beautiful, fluid shot making and shot creation. Then, a couple possessions later, gets by Luka, hop steps to then fade away from the drop defender to hit a beautiful fadeaway jumper. Then, a couple possessions later, gets hacked, puts up a one-legged fall-away rainbow that goes for an and one. Then, a couple possessions later, spins off a defender, pump fakes, nails a 15-footer. Like, that's within a 3-minute span. Just 4 incredibly impressive displays of shot creation and shot making from the short mid-range and mid-range. And that's just what he does. The footwork, the balance, the pure shot making, it's so great. And he has so many counters, so many ways to get to those shots. So because of that, because of how great he is from everywhere on the floor, and because of how many ways he can get to those looks, I don't worry as much about volatility with him as I do some other guys who are specifically reliant on pull-up jumpers, like, say, a Kevin Durant. And again, Book is able to pressure the rim a little bit more as a younger, better athlete who's a bit more physical. And we can't downplay what he did last year in the playoffs. 34 points per game over 11 games on 69% true shooting. It was one of the most disgusting pull-up jump shooting runs that we have ever seen. You can't expect him to replicate that, but it shows you what he is capable of as a pure pull-up shooter and why he's different from almost everybody else on the planet in that respect. Again, I mean, he was more efficient than KD as a pull-up shooter in last run. KD struggled at times. Book really didn't, and he's been more efficient throughout this regular season. The one limitation is that he is not that elite athlete and that he doesn't apply consistent rim pressure compared to these other guys. 13% of his shots come at the rim, I think, this year. That's a pretty low number, so there is still some variance. Like, in the closeout game last year, he still had 14 points. That's possible for him, but it happens less because of how great he is and because it's not just step back three after step back three. It's, okay, let me attack you out of the post to go to a turnaround. Let me step through here and get to a floater. There's just so many different options, and he's just too good to have below this, in my opinion. Yeah, Giannis has the physical advantages, but Book has enough, just enough of the physical imposition. Let me get to my spots with this otherworldly shot making to where I would take him.
Yeah, D-Book's shot diet and variety made me consider putting him higher on my list. D-Book is one spot higher, so we flop here. So you can go back up next on the list. He's in my next spot, and it's fascinating to me because that is D-Book's limitation, right? The athleticism, but it's like it doesn't matter with him. He's so... The thing I equate it to is like a snake charmer, like the way he will lull his initial defender to sleep and then just blow by him. I don't know. It baffles me when you watch his tape because it's like with most guys, it's like Anthony Edwards just blows by a guy, right? I mean, straight to the rim. Russell Westbrook blows by a guy straight to the rim, right? These crazy explosive athletes. And then D-Book, it's like, okay, and got him. And then once he's froze, it's just... He just knows when to attack, and he knows when to pick his spots. And the variety's a real concern. That's why I thought about putting D-Book higher, is because there's one guy here that has similar athletic disadvantages. He's not a crazy athlete. He's not a crazy physically imposing scorer. And D-Book, too, you mentioned the big man guard stuff that Hoop Venue mentioned. That's what's crazy, too, is he's an efficient post player, too. Like, you put D-Book on the low block, and he can still go to those shots. So that's why I considered putting Book even higher on my list, because there isn't a spot on the court where he can't put a shot down. The one thing that I do think limits him, though, is the rhythm thing. And D-Book, in my opinion, is very much a rhythm scorer in the sense that he can have those torrential runs. Where last playoff run, he's 34 points on 69% true shooting. But in individual games, it always seems like in that first quarter, if D-Book misses 4 or 5 and he's off, it's like, oh, shit, man, D-Book's going to be off the rest of this game. Like, he's very much a rhythm-based scorer, and I think some of the guys above him aren't. And so that's why I would give him the nod. And there's one guy that I just can't – he's just an X factor that I just can't put many players above him, even though I think D-Book has more variety in his shots. Book was a very tough player to rank, man. I played with him all between basically 3 and 7. I had to figure out where Book was going to go, and I ultimately landed him in my 6th spot.
I love Devin Booker. He's amazing. He's so much fun to watch. Like, players like that, rarely exist throughout NBA period, NBA history. But in today's NBA, he really is a one-of-one guy. Just a beautiful, beautiful scorer of the basketball. Get in on the action with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. New customers who deposit $5 or more can get a no-sweat bet up to $1,000 back in a bonus bet.
Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code NERDS. New customers can get a no-sweat bet up to $1,000 if your first bet loses. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook with code NERDS. The crown is yours.
My number 6, Logan, I also feel a bit nervous about, particularly just with having Embiid over him because of the difference in playoff resume and playoff performance.
Don't do it.
I have Steph Curry at number 6.
We did it.
I will say, first of all, Steph is still comfortably higher than this on my list of all-around offensive players. He is a top 3 offensive player in basketball to me because of the playmaking and because of, say it with me, Logan, the gravity. The gravity just reshapes defenses. When you're talking about pure scoring, though, I do think there are guys who can blend great shot making with significantly more impressive physical attributes and therefore reach a bit of a higher ceiling. But I'm a huge Steph guy. I think that Steph is top 10 all time. I think that very often people have been too quick to try to dethrone Steph and say, oh, X young guard is better. He's still one of the 3 guys who I would most want to build my offense around in today's NBA. And he's giving you 28 a night on 64% true shooting this year, scoring with that efficiency without another high-end offensive threat on the floor. He is a dominant on-ball force, 75th percentile pick and roll score, 92nd percentile isolation score, and that is obviously because he is one of the greatest pure shot makers we have ever seen. 51% in the paint outside the restricted area in that floater range, 46% for mid-range, 39% on pull-up threes, and he's uniquely great off-ball, which completely changes the dynamics of how you guard him and how you guard the Warriors as a whole. He's a 92nd percentile scorer off screens, 91st percentile spot up, makes 47% of his catch and shoot threes, and that's why his offensive value just exceeds that of his pure scoring ability, like I said. And he is capable of explosions. We've seen it. He's got 4 40 pieces in his last 12 games. He had 60 against Atlanta. Like, when Steph is unconscious, good luck, dude. Good luck. He's one of the great scorers the game has ever seen. And regardless of what people will tell you, he translates to those late game clutch situations very, very well. I know there are still some people who say Steph isn't clutch, and those people mean it as some sort of like amorphous, I don't know, he's not built for the moment kind of thing. But I think there are also people who think, well, a 6'3" guy who isn't a great athlete, like, is he the ideal shot creator in those situations? He's just a one of one. He's an outlier to every rule that you've made in your mind, because he's the greatest three-point shooter that we've ever seen and one of the great pure shot makers we've ever seen. This year, he's leading the league in clutch scoring with 5 points per game on 70% true shooting. I really don't feel great about having him down here, especially considering how passionate I have been about the Embiid thing in the past and how passionate I've been in maintaining Steph's elite value to this day. I will say, the reasons I don't have him higher, this is not peak Steph Curry who we're looking at anymore. He is more specifically reliant on the 3 than ever before. 7% of his shots are coming at the rim. That is a crazy low number. And you can say, well, maybe he's saving himself a little bit in the regular season, but he's been below 9 in both of the last 2 postseason runs. And you may think, well, Steph's never been a guy who's about getting to the rim. In his MVP season, that number was over 22%. So he is getting to the rim less than a third as much. Even if you look back a couple years ago to his like MVP caliber campaign in 2021, it was significantly higher. And so for anyone, Steph is as much an exception to this rule as any player because he's the greatest three-point shooter ever. But there is still some volatility to being that specifically reliant on the 3 ball. Think about the Lakers series, right? He shoots 34% from 3, still had a really good series overall, but wasn't able to reach peak efficiency and production as a scorer because those perimeter shots just weren't falling. And at the end of the day, if you can get in the lane, if you can get either to the rim or to those 10-foot short-range jumpers and floaters and you make those shots with great efficiency, it's just going to be a little bit more consistent. And the other thing is, Steph is the greatest shooter ever. He's an amazing playoff performer, but his three-point efficiency has consistently taken a bit of a hit in the playoffs. He hasn't shot 40% from deep in any of his last 4 postseason runs. He's 38% overall. Still great, especially when you consider the shot quality, but in the regular season, I mean, Steph's 43%. He's only ever shot below 40% in one season. And I think that there's factors like just fatigue, right? You need your legs to be so involved in those three-point shots. And at times, he can settle for really tough shots off the dribble in these playoff settings, whereas other guys can get more to their spots at will on the floor with physicality. So overall, he's too playoff proven. He's too efficient to be any lower than this. I really didn't consider him any lower than this, but I do think some of the guys above him, their physical advantages plus great shot making now could surpass what Steph is with just a little bit more of that decline in his quickness in athleticism, being so specifically reliant on the three now. But I'm still going to lose some sleep over this one.
That's fair, the argument that you make against Steph, and that's ultimately why I considered a guy like D-Book above him, and that's ultimately why I went with other guys above him. Steph lands in at my 5 spot, and the great equalizer with Steph is the off-ball value that he brings, is the fact that nobody else on this list is a guy that you can just run off screens, you can run actions off ball for, and he is just as effective. Again, I do think that's the reason he can't be higher, is the fact that other guys can just simply, throughout the game, more physically impose themselves. And I think you make a great distinction, too. If we're talking about prime Steph Curry, like prime Steph Curry could be number 1 on this list, because he has the dynamism. He has the difference in shot quality. And now this guy is more perimeter-oriented. That being said, he is the greatest shooter on the court. He has the greatest touch in NBA history. And I don't understand the Steph isn't clutch narrative, or I'm sorry, dude, if you give me one possession and one player, there's nobody else I'm taking other than Steph Curry for 2 reasons. One, that guy just needs a sliver. Ooh. That guy needs a sliver, man. A sliver of a freaking shot. If you give him just a look at a window, boom, he can hit it. And 2, my dad has said this for years about Steph, and I completely agree. Steph Curry is the one guy that I've ever watched that seems like when he is sped up, when he is rushed, when he is forced to get a shot up quick, he's better. And it's a muscle memory thing. It's like when you've practiced your same stroke so many times. Old Bruce Lee quote I really like. I fear not the man who has practiced 1,000 kicks one time. I fear the man who's practiced one kick 1,000 times. Steph has perfected that stroke so much that when he's in these pressure cooker clutch situations, it's instinct. It's second to it's nature. Like I think about the buzzer beater he hits against the Suns. Right. Bradley Beal bit just for half a second, and that's all Steph needed to boom, gone. Like I'm telling you, I think in a one-possession setting, Steph still might be the guy that I take to close out a game for me, and that's a big difference. The fact that, and it's not just the perimeter, right? He can do it from the mid-range. He just has the greatest touch of any player that we've ever seen, and that still matters. I couldn't leave him outside of the top 5, and I'm with you too. If we're talking about a playoff run, totality of value, playmaking included, he is a top 3 guy. And I considered both Book, I considered both Steph all the way up to top 3, but there are guys that are just going to get to their spots a little more easily throughout the game, and that matters to me. So Steph lands in at 5, but he was arguably the toughest guy to rank on this whole list.
Dude, I feel so weird about having Embiid above him. So weird. So weird, because if you were going to ask me, okay, who is more likely to bottom out? Who's going to have 23 a night on bad efficiency in a playoff run? It would definitely be Embiid, because I would say, well, it's what he's done literally the last 2 years. Why would I be shocked by that? If you told me one guy was going to average 37 points per game on absurd efficiency, it would also be Embiid.
Yeah.
So I just don't know what to do with the guy. I don't know what to do with him at this point. I feel okay with 5. But I don't feel great about Steph at 6 just because I have so much respect for him. And he consistently delivers in the playoffs. One of the great playoff scorers we've ever seen. Okay, so now you have Steph at 5. I have Embiid at 5. Who is in your 4 spot?
At number 4 is one of my favorite players to watch in all of the league. I immensely enjoy watching this guy. He's basketball perfected, man. It's Kawhi Leonard. He's just methodical, man. I know everybody calls him like a basketball robot, but it really feels like he's just in complete control. He's just methodical and extremely efficient, man. He gets to his spots. I don't really quite understand it, man. Like Kawhi is the guy that you can play perfect defense on. And it doesn't matter. It's like, oh, well, that's going in. Sorry. Kawhi bumped you. Kawhi bumped you 3% off the spot you needed to be on. Sorry, it's going in, right? Like it's like he's the Terminator. I know that's a comp that everybody gives, but it's like he's a basketball computer processing on the court exactly what he needs to do to tip the balance is in his favor. And he's fucking strong, man. Kawhi is.
God.
He's so physical, dude. I think that gets lost with some of these mid-range guys, and that's what makes it so much fun to watch. Like, everybody else on this list, Kawhi, I'll spoil my list because I assume we have the same 4 guys up here. Kawhi,
spoiler. Oh, you're just going to say the names. Yeah.
Kawhi, SGA, Luka, and Jokic. It's like all of these guys are so physical, and they just weaponize it. And Kawhi feels inevitable. Again, you may look at the raw scoring numbers and say, oh, why is Kawhi on this list? You got other guys averaging 28. Kawhi's only averaging 24. He does it so freaking efficiently and so effectively. 24 on 53, 45, 89 splits. He's a 96th percentile scorer out of handoffs. He's a 97th percentile guy off cuts. He's 94th percentile out of isolation. He's 90th percentile as a pick-and-roll ball handler. He's 80th percentile out of spot-up. Like, he's just efficient out of every action. And again, when you watch him on tape, I don't get it. He makes basketball look so simple and easy, and it's not. It is not this. I don't know. He just makes it look so effortless. Every play, it seems like that the Clippers run, that little handoff at the top of the key. Kawhi curls around, but he doesn't let the defender blow him off of his line. Kawhi blows the defender off of his line, curls right around the screen, explodes to the elbow, boom, hits him with his little shoulder. Pull up, it's water. And it's unstoppable. Whatever Kawhi wants, Kawhi goes and gets. And you could argue that there is nobody that it is directly translated more for in the playoffs. And that's the one take that I think I have had that is rock solid. When we did our all-time NBA draft with you and Gabe, and I took Kawhi very high in that draft, that's the one pick that I really think that I nailed that I would go back to. I'm very fine with starting Kawhi as an all-time 3. Like, his game is perfect, and you could put him alongside. That's another thing about Kawhi too, is it's like his scoring isn't a Luka or a Jokic level in terms of how heliocentric they are. Kawhi just gets his touches and he makes the most of them, and he can do it off ball. He can do it on ball. Kawhi is a perfect basketball player, and like I said, he is one of my top 5 favorite guys to watch. He's probably, I would go SGA, Brunson, Steph, Kawhi, and then maybe Luka. Those are probably my top 5 guys to watch in the league. Kawhi's a perfect basketball player, man.
He's close. What I would say he is the perfect assassin scoring wing archetype. When you think about a guy who gets a bucket no matter what and is going to be able to stop the opposing wing from getting a bucket, like that's what Kawhi has been throughout his prime. And what's so incredible to me is obviously he's not as old as a Kevin Durant, right? KD came into the league 4 years before Kawhi. But when you consider that he has still been in the league, this is his 13th year, and when you consider all that his body's been through in terms of injuries, it is incredible how consistently he has maintained this peak level when he is on the floor. Like, as great as a KD is, the fall off from his peak is more noticeable, right? Because he's just lost so much of that athleticism. Kawhi just has this insane combination of elite strength, great pace, and unfathomable pull-up shooting, and he's just gotten better and better and better as a shooter over the years, and he hasn't lost any of that strength. You read out the efficiency across play type. It is absurd. It is absurd. He is scoring with dream efficiency basically out of every action in which he is involved, and it is because he just doesn't miss jumpers. Like, he shoots 55% in the paint outside the restricted area. Of all of the great numbers who I've given out for guys in that range, that's the best so far. He shoots 41% on pull-up threes. That's better than Steph Curry. That's significantly better than a Kevin Durant. And he's also a crazy efficient finisher at the rim, 76% in the restricted area, and he is still getting there more than those other guys, right? He's not an elite rim pressure at this stage in his career, but because of his physicality and because he's still got a little bit more quickness than like a Kevin Durant, he still has more of that dimension to his game. But most importantly, it's the physical dominance, getting to those short mid-range looks, those short jumpers in the paint where he just doesn't miss. And he is great off ball. Makes 48% of his catch and shoot threes. And that's why I have him at number 3. I have him even one spot higher. And I imagine this and maybe SGA will be the most surprising placements on this list. I think there's going to be a lot that people are surprised by. Maybe Embiid down at 5 considering his regular season resume. But my top 3 guys are, to me, 3 guys who in terms of playoff scoring have been arguably a tier above everybody else. Kawhi's game translates perfectly to the playoffs because in those rock fights, he is strong enough to get where he wants, and he is a great enough shot maker to score with incredible efficiency. There is no matchup that can change that. There is no coverage that can change that. He gets what he wants. And that is why, since the title run back in Toronto, 2019, Kawhi has been incredible in every playoff run as a scorer. 30 points per game on 63% true shooting over that time. It is a resume, a playoff resume that's only rivaled by Jokic and Luka in that span. And I just really don't think that he's fallen off as much as maybe the raw numbers or just the fact that he isn't in the discourse as much would indicate. When a guy gets where he wants on the floor no matter what and doesn't miss, like, that guy's unbelievable. The only reason that I might even have a couple guys above him, who I do, is because, well, I think that they maybe even have more variety overall as scorers and even more outstanding touch in one case and even more like unbelievable physical advantages. But I really can't have Kawhi below this. His game translates to the playoffs as well as anybody's.
And yeah, man, that's really the thing about Kawhi that makes him stand out is the fact that he does get to those spots. Like when you think about a KD highlight, just imagine it in your head for a second.
Imagine it, visualize it.
It's a tough jumper. It is him fading away. It is him getting knocked off. It is him being forced to knock down a tough jumper. When you imagine a Kawhi jumper, it's him just going straight up and down right into it. And that's what makes it so unstoppable is it doesn't make sense. Like, that's why when I say, like, he just makes it look so easy, the reason that he's able to hit it with such efficiency is because every time he's shooting those, he is going straight up and down and he is balanced. And it is the same jumper that he's always shot, right? We can look at a guy like Kevin Durant, or you can look at a Kobe Bryant, right? And you go, man, dude, what a tough bucket. What a tough shot. And I'm not taking anything away from those guys because those are valuable buckets to get. But it's like those are tough, and those are always going to be lower percentage because your body weight is undistributed, and you are fading away and falling. It's just inherently going to make the jumper tough. When Kawhi can just get to that spot and rise and fire right at 90 degrees, coming up and back down, that shot is just going to fall with more efficiency because it's a straight up and down jumper. And Kawhi always gets there. Like, Kawhi never looks rushed, flustered, under duress, stressed. It's, I'm getting there. I'm getting my shot. I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, think about what he did last playoff run. It wasn't long. It was very, very brief. But what he had, like 2, 3, 40 pieces. It was ridiculous, man. In those playoff scenarios, there are very few players that I trust more than Kawhi.
Last year, we only saw the 2 playoff games from him, but he was averaging 35 a night on 55% from the field, 60% from deep. The run before that, he was over 30 a night, 57% from the field, 39% from deep. It's just a level of efficiency and will as a scorer that is so, so rare. And that's why it's not like regular season volume is the determinant. That's why my scorers list isn't number 1, Joel Embiid, number 2, Luka Doncic, number 3, Giannis, number 4, SGA. It's about how does it translate to the playoffs, and Kawhi just passes that test perfectly. Number 4, though, I have a guy who actually hasn't been put to that test yet. And I think that's what is probably going to be controversial about this. People will say, well, how do you have Embiid at number 5 lower than he is as a regular season scorer because he hasn't done well in the playoffs when SGA hasn't been there? The reason to me is that Embiid's failings have been about skill set, and they've been repeated, and they've been things that before last year's playoff run, I told you, hey, this is why I have Embiid this low in my player rankings. These are the things that have historically failed him and I think may fail him again. And then they did. It was shot making. It was reliance on getting to the line. It was health. All of those things failed him as they have before. When I look at SGA's game, it's not just that he's scoring 31 a night on 65% true shooting, which makes him one of the elite top 5 regular season scorers. It is that he does the most valuable thing for those playoff environments to me, which is what we've talked about. Getting to your spots at will, specifically in and around the paint. Not being so reliant on just getting to the rim where you're a Giannis, and if teams wall you off, you can't beat them with over-the-top shot making. But being able to get 10, 15 feet from the rim and make over 50% of those shots, like, that's everything, man. That's where titles are won and lost. That's what Jokic did last year. That's what Kawhi has done in 2019. And I think that SGA excels there. He is an unstoppable downhill force. I think he's pretty clearly the hardest player in the league to stay in front of. He's number 1 among perimeter players in restricted area makes. And I have never seen a guy move like SGA. The shifts in gears are the most devastating in terms of just, oh my God, look at me. It's what you were talking about with Book, but it's on another level, like that ability to explode, to get to that top gear from nothing so quickly. And his body control around the rim, I've talked about, it's the best we've seen since MJ. Like that ballerina paint navigation, the spins, the footwork, and then his variety as a finisher, where he makes over 70% of his shots in the restricted area. He's one of the best paint scoring guards we've seen ever. I'm tempted to say the best paint scoring guard since Michael Jordan. Like these other dudes, if you're talking about guys who just pressure the rim at a crazy level, Russell Westbrook.
D-Wade.
D-Wade is up there. D-Wade is very much up there because he has maybe even a little bit more rim pressure, but SGA is a better short-range shot maker than any of those guys. He is 5th in makes in the paint outside the restricted area, and he shoots over 51% on those shots. He's also 6th in mid-range makes on over 49% shooting. So that's what I'm saying. That entire intermediate and inside area, SGA gets what he wants every time. He can stop on a dime, step back. He can snatch that ball back. He can give you a bump to get to his step back. He's legitimately a weapon out of the post. He doesn't post up a lot, but he scores with 96th percentile efficiency there. He has nasty footwork. He can spin. He can step through. He can fade. Like, he's just going to get a good shot inside of 15 feet. And people think of SGA as this just downhill guard like a John Morant or whoever. He shoots the best percentage, the best effective field goal percentage, 54, on pull-up jumpers of anybody on this list. Like, he is absolutely lethal there. He has a counter for everything, and he has such great skilled shot making on top of these great physical tools and just ability to get where he wants. He and Luka are the premier isolation scorers in basketball. They are the premier scoring guards in basketball. SGA scores with 92nd percentile efficiency out of pick and roll, a 93rd percentile isolation efficiency, and he's not a prolific three-point shooter. It's not where he wants to butter his bread, but he's accurate. He's nearly 38% this year. I think he's improved there, and specifically on step backs, he's 43%, and you see that in the Clippers game yesterday, right? If you're sitting a little bit too hard on a drive one angle, fine. He'll just pull it back, step back, and he's nails on those shots. And he's insane in the open court. We mostly focus on half-court scoring on this list, it feels like, because that's what, in those slowed-down playoff environments, you're going to rely on most. But he is one of the best transition scorers in basketball. So I understand the notion that he has to prove it in the playoffs. And I'm a little bit nervous having him this high because of that. But what I would ask is where we can point to Embiid's game and say, okay, this is where he struggles. The playmaking also, right? How that allows defenses to guard him differently, send doubles. That's not an issue for SGA, who's a very good playmaker. If you say that you're going to build a wall, as I've seen some teams do, like you would hear about Giannis back in the day, one of the best mid-range shooters in the NBA is just going to destroy you. If you say, well, it's going to be about more physical defense, moving him off his spots.
There's nobody better at using their body weight against them than SGA.
Well, I totally agree with that. I think his physicality is incredible and underrated because people look at this slight guy like SGA is taking all those bumps and bruises and he is using them against you. And I also just don't see dudes who can stay in front of him. Like, I was watching the Magic game right before the All-Star break. Jalen Suggs is the prototypical guy you would want to guard SGA, right? Compact, really physical guard who's also just a dog, who's also super athletic, should be able to stick with him. And he was defending him so well, and he was still getting work because it turns out an SGA turnaround is still unbelievably efficient. People who say he's a free throw merchant, that I saw a lot more last year, is just not true. He and Luka are like the same here. They both take a lot of free throws, about 9 a game, but it's because they get fouled a bunch on real drives. And Luka has actually taken more free throws in the playoffs than the regular season. Like, SGA isn't a grifter. It's not something that won't translate to me. And again, he's not reliant on it because he's an insane shot maker. Why are you talking about free throws when the guy makes 55% of his attempts from the field? That is the bottom line field goal percentage. We can go to an old-fashioned stat here. For a guard, 55% from the field, scoring 31 points per game. I think the guy's unbelievable. I think he is one of the modern marvels in the NBA. I think he is an MVP candidate for years and years to come. And he was so great last year, but he's gotten better. I mean, he's gotten even better as a mid-range shooter, gotten even better as a three-point shooter, gotten even better as a finisher around the rim. He just boggles my mind.
Yeah, when you're talking about modern scoring guards, the two guys that I would point to that you should watch and take notes on are Jalen Brunson and SGA, just in terms of how they operate, how they move, where they get. The difference with SGA, and that's the kind of point of emphasis that we've been talking about with all of these scorers, is his shot diet, his dynamism. When you are playing defense on a guy and he has everything in his bag, when he has every counter, you as a defender are in a personal hell. It's whatever decision you make, SGA has that counter and is going to go to the opposite that works against it. And he slithers like a snake, man. It's weird. Like, SGA moves like it's crafty, it's methodical, I've like you said, I've never seen anybody move quite like SGA. The one move that's so deadly to me is that step back, because it like creeps out of nowhere, and like it's like comical. It's like a cartoon almost when he drags that right leg back. Because it's like he's taking his right leg back 6 entire feet when he's creating that separation and just resets. I've never seen anybody as good at slamming on the brakes immediately and just stopping and boom. SGA has mastered scoring. I don't have any issue putting him up this high. I am so confident in SGA's game directly, unless it's a mental thing. Because there's nothing about his skill set and his talent. Like, the only thing that I think can limit SGA is if when he gets in that playoff scenario, it's a mental thing. There is nothing about his physical profile, about his skill set, about the way he gets his buckets that says he is going to falter in the playoffs. And it's the same thing I'd say about Embiid. There's nothing about Embiid's game, skill-wise or talent-wise, that screams to me he's going to falter. It is a mental thing to me.
I don't totally agree.
There's some matchups where I think Embiid can fall, but I think moreover than anything else, it's a mental thing with Embiid when it comes to the postseason. And to me, I don't know. Again, we haven't seen him on the stage, so we can't say yet. But SGA in the regular season, and SGA seems like a dog, like a headstrong, hard-nosed, ready for the moment kind of dog. I think you said this earlier too. He's shooting 49% on 10 pull-up field goals a game. You can look at all the different play types and actions. He is uber efficient out of them all. SGA's unstoppable, man. And it doesn't make sense. Every game that I watch, it's like, oh, SGA might miss that. Nope. They're playing great defense on him. SGA should miss that. It doesn't matter. There's an inevitability with SGA. And there's only two guys that I think I can put above him because they're just more physically imposing than SGA, even more physical, because that's something that I do think gets underrated, man. SGA's great at contact, using the elbow, using the little, and I don't care, man. You can get mad at it. Oh, it's a push-off. You can get mad. SGA's great at using it. Basketball's a contact. It's a physical sport, and that's not getting called. There are very few players better at using their body to create and open up looks in the mid-range, and he is one of the most dynamic scorers. Again, the reason I left Tatum off my list is the predictability is, I don't have to drop on Tatum on this possession. I don't have to fully go to the paint. The reason that SGA is so deadly is because he is such a great rim pressure and such a good finisher around the rim that defenders have to drop to the paint. They have to respect the fact that he could go to the rim. And when they do, when they overcompensate and go to the rim, he slams on the brakes and hit that mid-range jumper. You don't have to respect Tatum as much in that regard. You do with SGA. He is a a Rubik's Cube. He is a nightmare to guard, man. Like, SGA is effectively an unstoppable scorer.
I will just say real quick, I disagree with the comparison to Embiid because I think that there are red flags in Embiid's basketball skill set.
You do think that it's more of a mental thing than a physical skill set thing, right?
Maybe what we've seen from the jump shot in these last couple runs specifically, but I think it's also worth noting, before last year, Embiid wasn't a great jump shooter. He was like a solid jump shooting big who was going to be in the mid 40s maybe from mid-range, and if he was overly reliant on that, like, it wouldn't shock you necessarily if that failed him. Also, the playmaking thing has always been there. The inability to dissect doubles. The health questions have always been there. So is part of it mental? Sure, I can buy that, but there were weaknesses there that you could pinpoint and say, okay, let's attack this. Let's try to force him into this tendency that I just don't see with SGA. So that's why it feels different to me. He still has to prove it, but I'm going to bet on him proving it. These are our projections, all right? We're playing it bold. I think it pays off. So now we are down to the top two, Logan. We both have Luka and Jokic. Who is in your 2 spot?
Number 2, I have Luka. Luka's at 34 points per game on 49, 38, 78 splits. And I could see you having Luka at number 1. I mean, Jokic has struggled a little bit more with his jumper this year in touch shot making. Like, he's only at 35% from deep. The difference to me is the strength. Jokic is one of the strongest guys I've ever seen. He's strong like an ox, strong like a cow. Like, he's got that Serbian strength, man. Like,
he sure does.
Yeah, it's pick a big farm animal, and that's what you can comp. You know, Luka's strong like a
moose.
Yeah, Luka's strong like another animal, but Jokic is.
Hold on, we need an animal comparison.
Man, we do need an animal. I got to come up with one for Luka. Because it's not cow or ox. That's definitely a moose is a good one. Luka's
Man, Luka has a very unique athleticism. Because I wouldn't say that it's about, like, agility. What animal is great at stopping on a dime, Logan? What animal is really great deceleration and change in pace? It may not work for Luka.
I think of like a gazelle, but it's not.
But he's
Luka's
not a gazelle. SGA is more like a gazelle.
I agree.
So let's move on.
Shai's like an impala. Yeah, like a
Well, that's a very subtle difference.
I don't know what animal Luka would be, but he's strong. He's got the change in pace, and it's kind of like D-Book 2, where I talk about him lulling you to sleep, where it's like it's boom, got him. Once I've frozen him, boom, I've got him in jail. And the touch, we can start with the physical, the strength. Like, if Luka gets a slight framed guy on him, he is going to lower his shoulder and bully him to where he needs to go, to the post, and then it's over. If Luka does get matched up with one of those stronger guys, well, then that's where he weaponizes his agility, his change of pace, and he can blow by guys and get to the rack. And the other thing is the fact that sometimes it really doesn't matter. You can put a great defender on Luka that matches up with him physically and athletically in every way, that is going to be as strong as him, that won't let him bully him off of his line, that is maybe faster than Luka with long arms, that can recover. And then it's like Luka's touch is just so damn good that it just doesn't matter, where he will get to the baseline and throw up this goofy, uncoordinated, off-balance shot, boom, in.
Yeah.
And he'll get to the baseline and just throw up a layup that's off balance, and he gets knocked to the floor, and it goes in. Luka does superhuman stuff on a nightly basis that is just unstoppable. That's it. Is that just it really doesn't matter what player you throw at him. It seems like Luka's going to get to his spots and do his own thing. And the only thing that maybe I would throw up against Luka is him settling for dumb shots, because it is clear with Luka, where now that he has Kyrie, I think this is to a less extent, but It's kind of that thing with most great players, where it's like they know they're the star guy, they feel like they're the best player on the court, and it's like sometimes they're just going to take a possession for themselves, and you got to deal with it. And so maybe that's the only knock I'd have on Luka, is that he settles sometimes for step-back threes or bad jump shots, but it's like I'm going to take that with everything else that he can do on the floor. And for the most part, Luka's getting downhill, and he's getting a really great look that's close to the rack, that's an effective look. There's only one guy I'd have above him, and that is because he is so freaking strong that he can just about big body everybody in the league while combining that with elite touch, that I just think is going to come back when it comes time for playoffs. But It's really marginal between Luka and Jokic. The difference is, though, to me, is that strength and physical imposition that Jokic can basically impose on everybody.
It's definitely a close debate at this point. These were my top 2 scorers at the start of the year when I had that conversation. And I think that Kawhi was 3, or he might have been 4. I know that all of my top 5 guys remained in my top 7. Embiid and SGA were the introductions into that tier. But it's just incredible, the combination of volume and efficiency. That almost goes without saying. This is the best Luka that we've ever seen. And he's making a real MVP push. Like, if the Mavs down the stretch keep winning and end up being a 50 to 52, 53 win team, I think it's going to be hard to make a case against Luka, because this volume and efficiency combination of scoring and playmaking now leading to team success will really be kind of unprecedented. And it's an awesome race this year. I think there's multiple guys who make really strong cases, 4 of them, frankly, and it could be 5 if Embiid were still healthy. But when you're talking about translating to that playoff environment, almost nobody has held up better than Luka Doncic. 32.5 points per game in the playoffs in his career on 58% true shooting. But it's worth noting that that is brought down by the fact that he had really bad free throw runs in his first 2 series against the Clippers. So like his actual shot making and efficiency there has been pretty exceptional. It is that combination of elite strength, elite change in pace, and unreal touch. Like you said, like we've been saying about these guys, the dudes who get where they want on the floor and then have that unbelievable skilled shot making just leave you helpless. And Luka can do that out of various actions. 92nd percentile pick and roll score, 81st percentile isolation score. He can crush mismatches out of the post. He's an elite rim finisher, shoots 76% in the restricted area. His touch inside the paint, outside the restricted area. I gave props to Kawhi for setting the bar for that number in that range. Luka matches it, 55%. I mean, what he does from floater range is unbelievable. And what puts him up even another level this year is historically what you said about like the one complaint with Luka being him settling has held up, where he's been like a 34% three-point shooter. When he came into the league, he was even a level below that. And you were like, man, you're letting the defense off the hook. You can get where you want. Why would you take these shots that you aren't great at such a high volume? Now he's great at those shots. He's 38% from deep. He's 39% on step back threes on ridiculous volume. Like, he's just really mastered the art of scoring. And I see a real case for him at number 1 because he can carry a volume load that I don't know that anybody else on the planet can. The reason that I still have Jokic number 1 is I think he leaves defenses truly helpless in a way that nobody else can. You said one of the strongest guys ever, and not just elite touch shot making, the best touch shot maker in and around the paint we have ever seen in the history of basketball. We'll get into that in a second, but his efficiency on floaters and hooks and turnarounds, it's unfathomable. You can't conceive of the fact that a guy could be that great at scoring in that range. And so the efficiency that Jokic has because of that is the separator. It's not about how much do you score. It's about how unstoppable are you as a scorer. And I still think Jokic is number 1 in the unstoppable category. But if you want to argue Luka, that's fine. I'll hear it. He is a historic scorer who, I mean, has been on a historic pace year after year after year, and now is clearly the best he's ever been.
Yeah, and the thing, too, with Jokic, the distinction is I just think he draws a little more attention. Both of these guys draw a ton of attention, and they're also great playmakers out of it. That's what's so remarkable about both of these guys is the fact that, and that's a component, too, that I think people need to wake up and realize. Like, I think when we normally conventionally think about playmakers, it's just great, like, pure passers. And Jokic and Luka are 2 great pure passers, too. But the reason that they're so great is because they are dominant scorers, and they command so much attention from defenses. Like, dude, I think if Jokic wanted to, he could put up 40 to 50 a night. You know what? If he wanted to play wilt ball.
What did he do when the Suns tried to stick dudes in single coverage against him? He literally did it.
True. And they were like, we're going to let him beat us. And it worked for a couple of games, but it's like.
Not really. I mean, it was Book and KD going insane.
Yeah,
the
going
Nuggets
crazy.
Offense
True.
was cooking. Jokic was giving him 40-something on, like, insane efficiency.
Right back.
Yeah.
But he gets so much attention that he is forced to kick out. But they're great advantages that he creates because he's such a great scorer. If you don't send that second guy, guess what? boom, easy little hook shot. Like it's Jokic does. He's got some of the greatest touch I've ever seen. It's transcendent. He's got impeccable footwork. You combine that with the fact that he is so freaking strong, man. That is the one trait that just stands out above all of the rest is that he is country strong. He is farm strong. And yeah, man, Jokic to me is it until further notice. Until we see
Agreed.
Until we see Luka do something like that on the playoff stage or really take him down, I think it's got to be Jokic, man. Or, if his jump shot completely leaves him for this playoff run, which I just don't, I trust it. You know what I mean? I trust Jokic's shot to be back in time for the playoffs and to translate. And that ultimately is the difference, is the fact that when Jokic really does want, he can go on the low block and he can get anything he wants at a moment's notice because he's so strong and has that great touch. That's the little distinction to me that gives Jokic the edge over Luka.
Yeah, I mean, he is just simply put even more physically imposing and even on another level as a touch shot maker. And Luka is unbelievable. But these numbers, dude, 62% on floaters for Jokic, 60% on hooks, 56% on 2-point jump shots overall, 58% on turnaround jumpers. At 7 feet, 280 pounds, what can you do with that? Like, that is not supposed to be possible. And that is why nobody can handle him out of the post, because of that touch shot making that we've never seen before, with being maybe the strongest guy in the league, with awesome footwork and fakes and the ability to create just the sliver of separation that he needs for these shots. I don't think there's a single basketball player on the planet who you feel more helpless against in single coverage. And what's crazy is Jokic's better skill is his passing. Like, that's why he is so clearly the best offensive player on the planet. And I legit would argue the best half-court offensive player ever. We've had that conversation. No matter what, you are going to die. You're going to die. And that is why he had this run where he's giving you 30 a night on better than 63% true shooting, and he goes through Rudy Gobert and Anthony Davis and Bam Adebayo, and every single one of them is helpless against him in single coverage. Then also, he's an incredible off-ball player. He's one of the best pick-and-roll scorers in basketball because, well, then those floaters are automatic, or he can pick and pop, and there are stretches where his jump shot leaves him, but it's generally pretty lethal, and in the playoffs, it's been lethal. He's a 41% three-point shooter in his postseason career. And then when you think about what he can do moving off ball, spot up, he's consistently very efficient. Curling off screens, he's just a fantastic shooter. Even like initiating from the perimeter, stuff that isn't central to his game, but he's an 80th percentile isolation scorer. He is a 77th percentile pick and roll ball handler, the inverted pick and roll, how he can hunt mismatches there, and his shot making is just supreme. And again, it's not about regular season volume, it's about playoff scoring. How does it translate? And since Jokic reached his peak, he has been the best playoff scorer on the planet. And that's not just talking about like, skill set. I mean, the production and efficiency, over 30 points per game on 62% true shooting. Only Kawhi and Luka are in that tier overall between volume and efficiency, but what he's doing is more efficient than Luka. And it's because, again, he gets to these shots that he just doesn't miss. So I still don't think anybody can match him. I do agree with the one case you laid out for Luka. If you get Jokic, who's shooting the three ball at the level he was at the end of the 2022 season into the playoffs, right, if he's only shooting 28% on threes, so teams don't have to respect the pick and pop looks in the same ways, that changes the dynamic. But he's coming off of a run in which he was 46% from three. And historically in the playoffs, he really does deliver there. He just dials in. And when he dials in, it's over for everyone. When you don't get Jokic being like, maybe I'll see if I can get 20 assists tonight and only take 6 shots. When you get Jokic saying, okay, I'm doing whatever it takes to win, that means that he's going to obliterate you. So I just don't think there's anybody more unstoppable, and that is why he is still number one for me. What a list, man. This was a lot of fun. Hard. I'm sure some people will be upset. LeBron, leaving him off does still pain me a little bit. There were some tough calls here, but I feel pretty good about where I ended up overall.
I feel pretty good too. The one that I'm left with is Giannis versus KD. I feel like that was a really tough debate. And then the enigma that is Steph Curry, man. It's really hard to always quantify his off-ball value, but I'm very happy with my top 4. I think I got the top 4 right.
Yeah.
This is one of the tougher lists that we've had to done, man. And I got a feeling it's going to be pretty polarizing, pretty
Oh my God.
controversial. I can see. I don't know. I can honestly, I would hear arguments for a lot of different, orders on this list. I can hear a
Yeah.
lot of different justifications for a lot of different players, but ultimately it does come down to the playoff environment, and
Yeah.
that's what I went off of.
It's so funny that we think definitely more similarly on these things than we would to the average person. Like, I bet there are some people who are going to be like, what the hell is Kawhi doing at number 3 and 4
Yeah.
on your list? What's SGA doing in the top 4? But the skill sets translate, man. They do the things that are most valuable when it comes down to winning basketball, and the scoring talent in the league is unbelievable right now. Unbelievable. When you think about the 11 through 20 range, how many studs there are, like,
Yeah,
boy,
man.
basketball is in a pretty special place in terms of talent. All right, that's going to do it for us here today, guys. Hope you enjoyed. If you did, there's always more Nerd Sesh content. You can watch all of our full shows with video on the Nerd Sesh YouTube channel. You can also check out our video essays, video breakdowns that we do there, diving more in depth on specific NBA players and teams. I just did one on Josh Giddey yesterday. You can go ahead and find that. Also, we have our Trivia Gauntlet series. There will be another episode of that this weekend that you can watch us going head-to-head on some trivia. Should be very fun. You can follow us across social, TikTok, Instagram, @NerdSesh, Twitter, @Nerd_Sesh. You can see all of our trivia there and also some clips from the show. You can check out our merch if you want. Logan's got the hat. We got the flags behind us. We got shirts. We got hoodies. All that at thevolume.com. And you can join our Discord. That link is in the link tree across our social media bios. Just to talk some ball, maybe Photoshop us onto Pachycephalosauruses. All sorts of fun stuff goes in there. Matthew Spawnhour, you now have a chance to speak to the great Matthew Spawnhour. He is in the Nerd Sesh Discord, so you can join that as well. And with that, as always, appreciate you guys. Hope you enjoyed. I've been Carson Brabber.
I have been Logan Camden.
And this was Nerd Sesh.